Joining us now is one of the reporters who broke this story, New York Times correspondent Kate Kelly. Ms. Kelly, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Rachel. Pleasure to join you.
What is the connection between the meetings that Mr. Kushner and Mr. Mnuchin took as government officials and the later investment that was made by government officials in these foreign countries you've described to make these massive investments in private ventures for both of those men?
Well, at a minimum, Rachel, I think those business meetings built the relationships and kept them warm at a time when both Kushner and Mnuchin were a mere weeks away or just a couple of months away from leaving office as Trump stepped down. So they got to know their foreign counterparts. In Kushner's case, these were rulers of countries, these were other senior officials, but also importantly, the heads of sovereign wealth funds or, the large government investment funds run by many countries and notably in the Persian Gulf. In Mnuchin's case, and you pointed this out in your intro, these 18 country visits over 4 years, which had a huge cluster toward the end of the administration, actually in January of 21, helped him get acquainted with these major investors who just mere months later would invest in his funds. Now, we also know that this Abraham Fund you mentioned, this $3 billion, or at least that was the goal, U.S. government-backed fund that was meant to fund development projects in places like Palestine, where Israeli checkpoints would be improved and modernized, among other things. That was something that was on both of those officials' item agenda as they toured the Gulf in those final months of office to talk about building enthusiasm and support for the fund. But as you noted, it didn't really go anywhere. What did go somewhere right after government was Jared Kushner's private equity fund, Affinity Partners, and Steven Mnuchin's private equity fund, Liberty Strategic Capital.
I described this as self-dealing because as somebody who's not an expert in this, somebody just a lay observer, this seems like kind of the dictionary definition of somebody using their public position, their access to government resources, potentially even their actions as government officials to set themselves up for private gain. Is that fair in terms of the layman's understanding of that? And as an extension of that, is this potentially illegal behavior?
Well, that was obviously one of the top questions we were asking ourselves, Rachel, as David Kirkpatrick and I reported on this. And what we discovered from talking to ethics experts is this is quite legal. If we as Americans want to see this kind of activity ceased in the future, we need to probably codify some new rules and regulations that prevent one from seeking outside investments from former government counterparts once they leave office, in this case, the executive branch. But right now, this is quite legal. Self-dealing is a little bit more of a term of art, but sure, I mean, depending on your perspective, I think that is something you could say. There are laws that govern your participation as a government official in matters that substantially or personally affect your financial position or that of your immediate family. I'm sure you're familiar with those. I believe it's 18 U.S.C. 208. But in this case, while not impossible, while I did speak to some ethics experts and some lawyers who thought this could theoretically be applied here, it's very hard because what you really need to establish is a quid pro quo. So both parties, in this case, a sovereign wealth fund and these officials, would have to know there was sort of a two-part transaction going on that resulted in them receiving this money. And I don't know that that's the case. I wouldn't want to suggest that it was. But in any case, even if it were, very hard to demonstrate for a prosecutor.
Right. Certainly to prove it in court. Of course. Kate Kelly, New York Times correspondent with this groundbreaking reporting. Thank you for helping us understand it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.